Welcome to the Call to Harmony, where we explore the inner journey to oneness with self, others, and the divine.
All right. Hi, everybody. We're back. Welcome back to the Call to Harmony. Savannah, do you want to say hi to the nice people?
Hello, nice people. Welcome back. Thanks for continuing to listen to us.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. We're so happy you're with us. We hope this has been helpful, productive, that we're talking about some things, even though some challenging things, and that we're helping you with some good practices that are helping you through dissonance and difficulties and helping you soak in the good stuff in life. So I was thinking recently that we started off this season 1 of this podcast with talking about what is harmony and then melody, the process of going through melody, dissonance, and harmony. And then we kind of stopped talking about that framework a little bit. And we've just been talking about practices that lead us to harmony. And it was on my mind that perhaps people were like, wait, I want to hear more about the journeys, the stories. And I totally understand that. And we will share more stories. We'll have other people share their stories. Savannah and I will share more of our stories. So in case the question is out there, is why are we just doing so many meditations and practices and talking about harmony like this? Let me answer it like this. Savannah, you've been to one of the retreats that we do called Harmony Road Retreats, right?
Yep.
And one of the best parts of these retreats is when we get people together, is everybody just shares openly exactly where they're at. And it's a beautiful feeling. The room often fills with compassion, a really sweet spirit there, just love and support for each other as we share our difficulties along our faith journeys. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I don't want to not do that on this podcast because those stories help us feel connected to each other. They help us realize our own humanity and they help our hearts swell and connect to others in compassion. And that's how we start on a Friday night. If it goes Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's how we start a retreat. But on Saturday, I always feel this desire to not get stuck in our stories, if that makes sense. Because it's very tempting to adopt a story, to see ourselves in a character to the story, as a character in the story, and then just to live into that. It gives us purpose. It gives us kind of a role to play. It gives us direction in our life, especially in times of faith difficulties or life difficulties. Or maybe it doesn't even have anything to do with faith. It might be the story of a sickness or a tragedy or a broken relationship or something like that. If we can tell ourselves a story that makes our role clear, that can feel very comforting and safe, if that makes sense. Now, why wouldn't we just do that over and over with this podcast? Well, because stories don't lead us to harmony. Stories keep us stuck in stories. Harmony actually exists in a place beyond story where we're living in the present moment, not playing a role, not playing a victim, not playing the hero, not playing a supporting character in whatever story we're seeing. But harmony comes online when we drop all the stories and we're right here, right now, living in the moment and watching it arise. And of course, our mind is going to tell stories about it. Our minds are constantly telling stories. Oh, this is why this happened. Oh, and this is the story of you walking outside and seeing that your dog peed on the pillar in the front porch again. And what do you do about that? Maybe I'm looking out the front window. That's just the first story that came to my mind. But like our minds are like programmed to tell stories all the time.
Yeah.
That give us purpose and direction. But Savannah, does it make sense to you, or do you have any thoughts about how stories can keep us from harmony?
Yeah, well, I think there's actually something that I just learned. I'm in school, so we just watched a TED Talk, and it's called A Single Story. And it's this woman, it's in my diversity class. So it's kind of talking about like a single perspective and like stereotypes, and that's kind of the realm. So there's this idea of a single story where we keep telling ourselves this narrative or a story or whatever, and it kind of keeps us in that single perspective, which can be really limiting, and it can prevent us from being more open-minded. And I think like with this specific situation with trying to find harmony and feel harmony, it is beyond like melody and dissonance. Like it's kind of this place that, like we've been talking about, like it has to be practiced. And so obviously if we are stuck in our single story, whatever that might be, it can be really hard to move beyond it or see beyond it, which defeats the whole purpose, right, of this process of finding harmony, because we've got to get out of our heads a little bit, and
Yeah.
kind of focus more back on I guess, where we're headed, rather than like, okay, this is just what's been going on and I'm stuck here and it sucks or it's uncomfortable or I'm upset about it or whatever. And there's a time for that and that's important. But again, I think the purpose of this podcast and Harmony Road retreats is to help people have resources and ways to find harmony, and that's through practice. So,
Yeah. I think you hit it on the head right there. Our brain starts telling stories when we're uncomfortable. It wants to make sense of the discomfort, and it will usually want to outsource the discomfort or blame it on somebody else,
yeah,
something other than our own doing or us getting into a situation, right? It's way more comfortable to think, oh, that person's a jerk, da 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 da. This is
yeah,
why. Or this relationship isn't working because da 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 da. And it's usually our minds are going to default in order to preserve our ego, our security, our secure identity. It's going to blame somebody else and tell a story that way. So we usually end up as a victim,
mm,
which that's a really hard, painful way to live.
yeah,
And the interesting thing is we tell ourselves victim stories as a response to pain. And what that does is it imprisons us in a story and prolongs the pain. Because as I walk through life, I see myself as a victim now and I'm trapped.
yeah,
Or even a hero in a story. You can see yourself as, oh, I'm the hero in this story because I see things that other people don't see, or I am going to overcome this problem that I'm tangling with. And what happens is, you heard me say going to, we're not living right now. We're living as some future hero, and we're not seeing ourselves in reality in relation to somebody else. We're playing a role.
yeah,
And so it's a really tricky thing. We have these minds, these storytellers that are embedded in us that pull us out of harmony time after time after time. So let's give some examples. So let's brainstorm really quick. Savannah, what are some types of stories that come into your head during life? Just general titles. One that comes to me is I've got my work story. Like, how is work going? What's kind of the future look like in my work? What does the past look like? Who are the key players? And what my story looks like at work? What other stories come to your mind that are stories that can come up and dominate you and pull you out of the present?
yeah. I mean, I think right now I'm in a master's program, and I think just that's a big story, and just like my future career, and that it's only a year away where I'll actually be in my profession. And I mean, there's so much time spent in my head about that story, about where I am right now, and will I actually get to where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be where I should be in a year, and like all of these things that kind of just circulate in my head that I think for sure pull me out of the present.
Yeah. And you're alluding to something. I'll just tell a story about why we shouldn't get stuck in stories. So I don't know. That's a
Mm,
couple of levels of ironic, I think, to me. But here's the story. When I was a senior in high school, I went to the senior dances with the same girl.
mm,
Hopefully, she's not listening to this. Actually, if you are, welcome. Welcome. I hope your life journey is going great. But here's the story. Um, we went to every date dance together that there was. There's only 4 in Twin Falls, Idaho back in the day. And I made a really big mistake just before prom. I had put off asking her to the dance and prom is the biggest dance of the year, right? And it's the biggest dance of a young woman's life
Schooler's
growing
life.
up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's the princess moment that you're preparing for. And there's a lot of background that goes into this, but for this reason and or the other reason, I didn't ask her until Wednesday before prom,
So 3 days before prom.
3 days before prom.
Yeah.
I feel very ashamed about this. I know I'm smiling, but deep down, I'm not really smiling. I'm still working through this. There were some dynamics going on. Yeah, anyway, we don't need to get into those. But I asked her on Wednesday, and she was so upset with me
Yeah.
that she said, "Hey, how about we do the meal? I'll make dinner. I'll make dinner. And so we'll start at my house." And so I was like, "Oh, that's really nice." And so I show up for dinner the day of prom, and I sit down at her kitchen table, and there's like no place settings or anything like that. And the vibe is super uncomfortable in the room. And she walks over to her kitchen, to her oven, pops it open, pulls out a tray that has Wendy's on it, and slams it down on the table, just drops it in front of me. And I was like, "Oh, ho, 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 ho. This is me learning about karma as
Yeah.
a senior." And she just and I was like, "Oh, message received. You
Uh-huh.
put as much thought into this meal as I did into"
You're at a prom. Poor
Mhm.
girl.
I know, the poor girl. Well, that wasn't the end of it. So this is our senior year, and she's going away to college, and we are in the same church congregation, and she was asked to speak to the congregation before she left. And so she gets up to the microphone, and she says, "You know, when I was little, I thought to myself, oh, I'll be happy once I get into junior high. Then I'll be happy. And then when I was in junior high, I thought, oh, once I get into high school, then I'll be happy. And then once I got to high school, I was like, well, once I get old enough to drive and get my license, then I'll be happy." And, in our congregation, we waited until we were 16 years old to date. And so she said, once I turn 16 and get to date, then I'll be happy. And then she said, and then, I got my driver's license, I started dating. And then I thought to myself, once I go to college and then I can date some real men,
Mm.
then I'll be happy.
You just
And
brought it home.
she
The
just brought
Wendy's
it.
and
I mean,
the church talk.
no, yeah. And I just felt all of a sudden every eye in the congregation kind of turn and look toward me. I'm sitting in the back. I can still picture where in the room I was sitting. And when
Uh,
she said, "Then I'll date some real men," I just felt myself shrink, like get really, really small. And all these eyes pivot around and look at me like,
yeah,
and I
no.
was like, "Sorry, everybody. Guess I'm not a real man." That's what I just felt like that, even the voice in my head. And she
Gosh.
went on with the talk, and I just felt horrible. On some level, I probably really deserved everything that I got from my thoughtlessness.
But still.
But still. Okay, so she's actually teaching a truth, right? A pretty common way that humans look at the world. "Hey, then I'll be happy," right? "When I
Yeah.
finish my degree, when I get this promotion, when I get out of this problem, when I get out of this relationship, when I get into a relationship," whatever it is, our mind is really good at coming up with this story of how happiness is going to come in the future, which means that harmony is not going to come in the present
Yeah.
because we're living in tension, not intention, but in tension with life as it is.
Mm,
And as we've talked about in past episodes, the only way forward into harmony is absolute 100% full acceptance
mm,
of what is.
yeah.
And then harmony comes online.
Yeah.
And so what an interesting thing that it's really common for us as humans to miss the experience of harmony because we're living for a future moment that can become satisfying for us just a fraction of a moment, and then there's a new end goal. Can I ask you, Savannah, like if you graduate and I didn't mean if you graduate. When you graduate.
I hope I do.
Yeah, you will. Full confidence. When you graduate and you're full-time as a therapist, what do you imagine might be the next story that your mind tells you?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as like career goes, I mean, I think eventually I'd like to have my own practice so I could see myself getting to being graduated and working towards my license and thinking like, oh, once I'm licensed, like I'll make more money and things will be my job will be even better. Or once I have my own practice and I don't have to work underneath someone else, like it'll all be like that's what I want, you know? Which isn't bad, again, like shooting for those goals and having, a focus there. But if that's all I'm thinking about, then it gets really hard to enjoy the process of becoming a licensed therapist and getting to build my own practice. And obviously there's so much work that goes into that has to come before that. Um, and it would be unfortunate to, but we do this all the time. It'd be unfortunate to just go through it just trying to get through it, where there probably are going to be a lot of incredible moments and hard moments and, everything in between that I could learn a lot from that maybe I'd miss if I'm not as present, just focusing on, oh, my next licensure or my next, big professional goal. So,
Absolutely. And I imagine, well, I know you're meeting with clients now, right?
mhm, yeah.
And our mind doesn't allow us when we start living for the future, our mind doesn't allow us to see the people that we're currently interacting with as as real as the people that we will interact with in the future, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
yeah.
And because of that, we won't give our full 100% presence to the now and the people in front of us and the situations in front of us because they aren't as real to our mind as the future.
Hmm,
And then when we get to the future, the same thing will happen. And so to
it's
practice
scary.
harmony is to bring every cell of our body, every bit of our attention, every bit of our consciousness to right here, right now, this moment.
Mhm,
And then we can feel harmony start to come online.
yeah.
So it's challenging, easier said than done, but hopefully that kind of frames what the challenge is here. So I wonder if we could do a quick practice here, Savannah. Let's just do a quick meditation of recognizing our stories and then coming back to the present moment.
And we'll point out here too, when we jump into some of these practices and thinking about your own stories, it can be helpful when you're first beginning some of these practices to pick a story or an experience that is maybe lower on a emotionally charged scale. So say
Mhm.
out of 1 to 10, 10 being more intense, maybe pick a story or an experience that's closer to like a 3 or a 4, a little bit lower on that scale, just for the sake of we don't want you guys to get into a more distressed state. And also, if you're new to practicing like this or meditation, anything within this realm, it can be important to just kind of understand the process of these practices and how they work before jumping into some more intense experiences that have maybe been really difficult for you to navigate.
Yeah, great reminder there. Thanks, Savannah. So, whoever's listening, take a moment to just settle in, maybe close your eyes for this so you can focus. But this is one of those practices that you could do while you were walking or driving or doing something else. But if you want to give yourself more chance to focus fully and not be distracted, you might close your eyes, sit in a position where you can keep your spine straight, and go ahead and take a breath that brings you more to the present moment as you pay attention to how it feels in your body. One conscious breath can make a really big difference. And then we're just gently going to turn our attention to any recent story that we can pick up that our mind has been telling us. It can be a big story, it can be a small story. It might have been very small and very recent, like that person just cut me off in traffic. And then your mind starts to spin a story about it. Or it might be a larger story from your life that I've got to take care of this problem. And maybe Your stories usually surface because we are worried about them, concerned about something. So maybe pause and ask yourself, what am I worried about? What am I concerned about? What is my mind working on? What are the problems that are at the top of my mind right now? And as a problem comes to the surface, just recognize it as a story comes to the surface. Just take a moment to recognize what is the role that you've assumed in that story. Is it as hero or conqueror? Is it as a villain? It could even be that. Is it as a victim or a side character? Or even as the author? And notice that role. And then notice as you assume that role, what kind of feelings come up in your mind as you see yourself in that role? What kind of feelings come up in your body as you see yourself in that role? And just notice the rising feelings, sensations. Maybe there's some type of turbulence or discomfort, or maybe there's some satisfaction that comes with the role that you see yourself in. Just allow the feelings to be there. And then just remind yourself, I am not those feelings. I am not the role that my mind has given me to play, but I am the soul that is bigger, more eternal, and infinite than this story. And then I am the soul that is more eternal and infinite than this story. I am not these thoughts. I am the observer of the thoughts and the story. And notice what happens as you step back from the story and just see it as a story rather than being pulled into it. Let's do one more. Let that story kind of subside and notice if another comes to take its place. Maybe it's a family story, a relationship story, a work story. Oftentimes, there's a feeling that rises up and then the thoughts come to accompany it. Give that story a name. Notice the feelings that are associated with that story. Maybe it's fear, nervousness, regret. Maybe it's satisfaction or peace. Whatever it is, welcome the feelings, allow them to be there, accept them. And then notice the role that your mind has given you in that story. Give your role a title. And then you can just recite to yourself, if your role was victim, I am not the victim. I am not a victim. I am not the hero. I am not the author. I am not the supporting character. I am not the comic relief. Whatever the role is, step back from it and remind yourself, I am the observer of the story, and I'm an eternal soul, infinite soul. And just see if the feelings from that story shift or subside a little. And if they're not shifting or subsiding, if they're getting bigger, that's okay too. Allow them to be there. Welcome the feelings instead of resisting accepting them. And then just notice that this is a story causing the feelings. And that as you can step back and recognize it as a story, you will be able to move forward rather than the story moving you forward. And if you want to pause the podcast and practice with a few more stories, this can be really helpful in untangling our stories. But we'll go ahead and wrap up, and you can open your eyes and come back to this present moment and think for a second, what shift did you notice? Savannah, let me just ask you, if you don't mind, you don't have to share any details, but what did you notice as you practiced naming a story, seeing your role in it, recognizing the feelings coming with it, and then stepping back from it?
I think it's interesting when you start to actually like think about your story, like which you usually are thinking about all the time, but when you're like intentionally thinking about the story, it's crazy how like almost tangible those feelings are that come up when you think about it. And when you start to name like, okay, who are you in this story? In one of my stories, I was the victim. In my other story, I was the villain. So it was just interesting to see like, oh, wow, I've not like, kind of dissected this story in this way. And not that it was even that much of a dissection, but it was just like the intentionality behind thinking about the story and watching what feelings it would bring up and how I felt it in my body and trying to take a step back. In my second story, I tried taking a step back and thinking it's just a story. And it's like, well, no, actually, something really did happen.
Right.
And it's not just a story. Like, because I think sometimes we hear in our heads, like, oh, it's a story. It's like, it's not
Those feelings aren't
real
real.
or
Yeah.
that you're making stuff up. But I'm like, wait a sec. No, someone actually said this thing. And like that was a real experience. It wasn't just a story. But I think outside of that, okay, what's the additional stuff I'm telling myself about that experience, right? Like, what story am I creating around that? That I'm a bad person because of that conversation, that I did something wrong, all these other things that might not be as true or just that are interesting to consider. So that was interesting for me because I was like, oh, wait, this is real though. So how can I take a step back? But then the thoughts came of, oh, there's other things that I've started telling myself because of that real life experience, that real story that have evolved that story into something probably more than what it was. So,
Yeah.
anyway, it's an interesting practice to intentionally think about what stories you're. And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stories going on in my head.
Yeah. There are. It's amazing how many storylines our mind can keep track of, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
almost like a new person walks into the room and you pick up another storyline, or you walk
Yeah.
into a new situation, there's a new storyline.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Savannah, because I don't want to suggest that the pain, the difficulty, the stress that comes from our stories is not real.
Hmm.
It's absolutely real and difficult and very challenging. So when we say story, we don't want to say it in like a
Fictional way.
condescending, diminishing way. What did
Yeah.
you say?
I said fictional. It's not a
Yeah.
fictional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's not something that we need to just brush aside. As we brush that aside, we might be dismissing our own feelings and others' feelings, our own experience and others' experiences. What we can do is step back from it and see that there's a part of us that actually isn't engaged in the story, the observing part of us.
Hmm.
And when we step back into that, then we can look at it from an objective standpoint, like you were referring to. And we can actually watch the story from a place of peace, which oftentimes isn't otherwise accessible to us. That harmony, if we step back into harmony, we can watch melody and dissonance and disruption and discomfort and all of these things. We can even experience discomfort while staying in that observing mindset, that harmony space. And then our stories don't take us over anymore.
Yeah.
It's a really challenging practice, but it can be really liberating. It can give us access to tools that we don't have when we're caught up in the emotions, when we're caught up in our thoughts, when we're caught up in the storytelling. Because ultimately, you and I and all of us listening to, participating in this podcast, we are eternal souls that are far bigger than any of these little stories that we pull ourselves down into and put a box around.
Oh.
because we are far bigger than any of those roles. And these stories are going to come and go. They're going to shift. What the stories that seem so important right now, they're going to change, and we're going to have totally different stories. And if we keep getting caught up in the stories, we're going to miss life, this moment, living, being, and being in harmony, which is the greatest way to be in this life. And actually, as we access that harmony, our stories will start to change around us. And so hopefully that was a helpful practice. Hopefully that was a way to step back from life and get a taste of some harmony that can come as we keep recognizing our stories, stepping back, seeing them for what they are. And then we can step back into our lives fully engaged in the moment, not so caught up in the drama of our stories or the limited roles that we're playing.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for taking us through that.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for being with us. Thanks, Savannah.
No problem.
And we will catch everyone next time.
See you then. Thank you for listening, and we hope you will join us next time on The Call to Harmony.